"We have your sister, Marine. Bring us $2 million. You have 72 hours. The line went dead, and Marcus Rodriguez's world shattered. His little sister Emma, a 23-year-old aid worker, had vanished from Tijuana. Now he knew why. The Sangre Nueva cartel wanted revenge for his classified operations along the Mexican border. Within hours, Marcus packed everything he'd need: military-grade weapons, combat knives, a burner phone, fake passport under the name Miguel Santos, and every dollar he had. The decorated Marine Force Recon operative was going undercover to infiltrate one of Mexico's most ruthless cartels. As his plane touched down in Mexico City, Marcus knew there was no turning back. One wrong move, one blown cover, and both he and Emma would disappear forever. Will this decorated war hero succeed in the most dangerous mission of his life? Can he outsmart a cartel that's already 10 steps ahead? Before we dive into this incredible story, comment below where you're watching from around the world. You will definitely get a reply from us. And make sure to subscribe. You won't want to miss tomorrow's video. Marcus spent the next 18 hours in a motel doing what he did best: reconnaissance and planning. Using his military contacts, he discovered the kidnapping wasn't random. The Sangre Nueva cartel, a vicious splinter group known for targeting Americans, had been watching his family for weeks, but they'd made one critical mistake. They assumed Marcus was just another veteran struggling to pay bills. They had no idea they'd just declared war on someone trained in psychological operations and unconventional warfare. His plan was insane, but it might just work. Marcus would pose as Miguel Santos, a corrupt American arms dealer looking to establish new supply line. The identity was perfect. It explained his military knowledge, his access to weapons, and most importantly, why he was willing to cross into cartel territory. But first, he needed to look the part. Marcus changed his military haircut into a slicked back style, grew out his facial hair, and traded his clean-cut appearance for gold chains and expensive clothes bought with his entire life savings. He practiced speaking with a slight accent, memorized every detail of Miguel Santos's fabricated criminal history, and armed himself with weapons that couldn't be traced back to his real identity. The hardest part? Convincing himself that he could become the kind of man he'd spent years fighting against. Tijuana at night was a different world. Neon lights reflected off wet streets, while shadows moved in ways that made Marcus's military instincts scream danger. But he pushed forward, knowing that somewhere in this maze of corruption and violence, his sister was waiting for rescue. The meeting was set at a nightclub called El Diablo Rojo, the Red Devil. Marcus walked through the door, every sense heightened, knowing that cartel soldiers were probably watching his every move through hidden cameras. The music was deafening, but Marcus could still hear the unmistakable sound of someone chambering around behind him. "Miguel Santos!" a voice called out in Spanish. Marcus turned slowly, hands visible, and came face to face with Carlos El Martillo Vazquez, the Hammer, Sangre Nueva's lieutenant, and the man who'd orchestrated Emma's kidnapping. "That's me," Marcus replied, forcing confidence into his voice. "I hear you guys need someone who understands both sides of the border." Carlos studied him with dead eyes that had seen too much violence. One wrong word, one suspicious gesture, and Marcus knew he'd join the countless people who'd simply vanished in this city. "We'll see," Carlos said finally. "But first, you prove you're not a cop." What Carlos said next would test every moral boundary Marcus had ever held sacred. Subscribe and drop a comment if you haven't. Back to the story. "There's a rival dealer who's been cutting into our territory," Carlos explained, sliding a photograph across the table. "You want to do business with us? Make him disappear." Marcus looked down at the photo and felt his blood run cold. The man in the picture couldn't be older than 19, barely older than Emma when she'd graduated high school. This was the moment Marcus realized how far he'd have to fall to save his sister. Every instinct screamed at him to walk away, but Emma's face flashed in his mind. Somewhere in this criminal empire, she was probably terrified, wondering if anyone was coming for her. "When?" Marcus asked, his voice steady, despite the war raging in his conscience. "Tonight. Do this, and we talk business." Marcus had 3 hours to figure out how to fake a murder, convince hardened criminals he was one of them, and somehow get closer to finding Emma, all without actually becoming the monster he was pretending to be. But as he left the nightclub, Marcus spotted something that made his heart race. In the VIP section, barely visible through the crowd, he saw a flash of red hair, Emma's hair. She was here, in this very building, and if he played this right, tonight might be his only chance to get them both out alive. Marcus circled the block 3 times, his mind racing. The young dealer, Roberto, was exactly where Carlos said he'd be, selling drugs to young men and women who had no idea they were financing one of Mexico's bloodiest conflicts. But Marcus had found him for a different reason. "Roberto," Marcus called out in Spanish, "we need to talk, now." The kid's hand moved toward his waistband, but Marcus was faster, grabbing his wrist with the precision of someone trained to disarm enemies in the dark. "Listen very carefully," Marcus whispered urgently. "In about 2 hours, Carlos Vazquez is going to send people to kill you. You have one chance to live through this night." Roberto's eyes went wide. "Who are you?" "Someone who needs your help to save an innocent life. But first, you're going to help me stage your own death." What happened next was a masterclass in military deception. Using Hollywood-level special effects knowledge he'd picked up from a medic friend, Marcus created a scene so convincing that even the cartel's most experienced killers would believe Roberto was dead. Fake blood, strategic camera angles, and Roberto's surprisingly good acting skills combined to create photographic proof that Miguel Santos had eliminated the competition. But the real test was still coming. When Marcus returned to El Diablo Rojo with photos of Roberto's corpse, Carlos studied each image with the cold precision of a man who'd seen countless murders. "The blood splatter is perfect," Carlos murmured, zooming in on Marcus's phone. "Most amateurs get that wrong. You've done this before, haven't you, Miguel?" Marcus forced a grim smile. "Let's just say I've never left witnesses." Carlos smiled for the first time that evening. "Welcome to the family, Miguel." Those 4 words changed everything. But as Marcus was about to discover, joining this family meant descending into a nightmare he never could have imagined. Carlos led him through a hidden door behind the bar that required 3 different key codes to open. They descended concrete steps that seemed to go down forever, each level revealing new horrors of the cartel's operation. "Most people who see what you're about to see," Carlos said casually as they walked, "never leave this building alive. Consider this your final test, Miguel." The first basement level was a weapons warehouse that would make military armories jealous. Assault rifles, rocket launchers, explosives, and ammunition stacked floor to ceiling. They descended further, past levels that Marcus couldn't even begin to comprehend. A drug processing facility that operated like a factory, and then the interrogation rooms. "This is where we get information from people who don't want to share," Carlos said, opening a door to reveal torture equipment that belonged in a medieval dungeon. "Very effective. Would you like a demonstration?" Marcus shook his head, trying to maintain his cover, while every fiber of his being screamed to end this monster right here, right now. But Emma was somewhere in this labyrinth, and one wrong move would get them both killed. They reached the bottom level, a reinforced concrete bunker that felt like being buried alive. The air was thick and stale, and the only sound was the hum of generators, keeping the underground facility operational. "And this," Carlos said, stopping in front of a massive steel door, "is where we keep our most precious cargo." The door opened to reveal a corridor lined with cells, not prison cells, something worse. These were designed to hold people indefinitely, to break their spirits before breaking their bodies. And there, in the 3rd cell on the right, behind reinforced glass and steel bars, was Emma. Marcus had to bite his tongue to keep from crying out. His little sister, the girl who used to make him friendship bracelets, who called him her hero, who believed she could save the world one person at a time, sat in a corner wearing the same torn aid worker shirt she'd been kidnapped in 3 days ago. She was alive, but barely recognizable. The light had gone out of her eyes, replaced by the hollow stare of someone who'd given up hope. "Your sister is very beautiful," Carlos said casually, and Marcus felt every muscle in his body tense. Such a shame about what's going to happen to her. Marcus turned to face Carlos, and in that moment, he realized something that chilled him to the bone. Carlos was smiling, not the satisfied smile of a businessman who just made a deal. This was the predatory grin of a cat that had been playing with a mouse all along. "You really thought this was about money?" Carlos laughed. "You really believed we wanted $2 million for some random aid worker?" The truth hit Marcus like a physical blow. "This was never about ransom," he said quietly. "Very good, Miguel. Or should I say, Marcus Rodriguez, Force Recon Marine, 3 tours in Afghanistan, recipient of the Silver Star, and the man who put a bullet in my brother's head in Kandahar province." Suddenly, the corridor filled with cartel soldiers emerging from hidden alcoves, all pointing weapons at Marcus's head. Red laser sights danced across his chest like deadly fireflies. "Did you really think," Carlos continued, "that we wouldn't know exactly who you are? That we haven't been planning this for 2 years?" Marcus kept his hands visible, his mind racing through possibilities. 15 armed men, reinforced concrete bunker, no backup, no escape route, and Emma 20 feet away, watching her brother about to die. "My brother Luis was a good soldier," Carlos said, walking in a slow circle around Marcus. "He believed in our cause, and you murdered him in cold blood during one of your classified operations." Marcus remembered Luis Vazquez, a high-value target who'd been funding Taliban operations with cartel money. The kill had been clean, professional, necessary, but he'd never expected it to follow him home. "So we studied you," Carlos continued, "learned everything about your family, your sister's bleeding heart, her need to save everyone. It was so easy to manipulate her into volunteering in Tijuana, so easy to grab her when she was alone." Emma's eyes widened as she finally understood. This wasn't random. This was revenge, and she was the weapon being used against her brother. "The beautiful part," Carlos said, "is that you came to us, walked right into our trap, even brought us fake identity papers and weapons we can trace back to you. When they find your bodies, it'll look like Miguel Santos, arms dealer, was killed in a deal gone wrong, along with his American accomplice." Marcus felt the walls closing in. Every training scenario, every tactical situation he'd ever studied, and none of it had prepared him for this. He'd been outplayed from the very beginning. "Before I kill you both," Carlos said, "I want you to know that your sister's death won't be quick. We're going to make her suffer for every day my brother spent in the ground, and you're going to watch." 2 soldiers dragged Emma from her cell. Even in her weakened state, she fought them, and Marcus felt pride mixed with desperation. She was still his little sister, still fighting even when hope was gone. "Any last words, Marine?" Carlos asked, pressing a pistol against Marcus's temple. Marcus looked at his sister, then at Carlos, and made a decision that would either save them both or guarantee they died together. "Just one question," Marcus said calmly. "Did you really think I came here alone?" Carlos hesitated, doubt flickering in his eyes for just a moment. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Marcus asked. "You said you studied me for 2 years. Then you know I never go into enemy territory without backup." It was a complete lie, but Marcus had learned something about Carlos in the past hour. The man was paranoid, constantly looking over his shoulder, always expecting betrayal. It came with the territory of being a cartel leader. "Check the surface," Carlos barked to one of his men. "All radio stations, all lookouts, report back immediately." Marcus used those precious seconds to catch Emma's eye. He blinked twice, then looked toward the elevator. She was too smart not to understand. When chaos started, run for the exit. "Sir," came a voice over the radio, "we've got movement on the north side. Unknown number of contacts." It was probably just late-night club goers, but Carlos didn't know that. "How many?" Carlos demanded. "Can't tell. They've got jammers running. Our comms are being disrupted." Another lie from nervous guards, but Carlos was beginning to sweat. "You brought friends," Carlos said, gun still pressed to Marcus's head. "Did you really think," Marcus echoed Carlos's earlier words, "that the U.S. military would let one of their own walk into a cartel stronghold without backup? You grabbed the wrong Marine sister, Carlos." A pipe burst somewhere in the upper levels, probably from the building's aging infrastructure, but to paranoid ears, it sounded like a flashbang grenade. "They're breaching the building!" someone shouted over the radio. Carlos's eyes darted between Marcus and the elevator. His perfect revenge was crumbling into chaos, and he was losing control of the situation. "Kill them both!" Carlos screamed. "Kill them now!" 15 guns. 1 Marine. No way out. Marcus Rodriguez stares death in the face as his sister watches in horror. The trap has been sprung. The revenge is complete. And in seconds, it will all be over. Carlos has planned this moment for 2 years. Every detail, every possibility, every escape route eliminated. But sometimes, in the darkest moments, when everything seems lost, that's when heroes are truly born. What happens in the next 60 seconds will shock you. What Marcus does, what Emma does, what Carlos never saw coming. It will leave you speechless. Hit subscribe and ring that notification bell right now, because part 2 drops tomorrow. And I promise you this, after watching what happens next, you'll never look at the word impossible the same way again. Comment below. Can anyone survive 15-to-1 odds in an underground concrete tomb?